Hi, everybody. Hi, Jasmina. So nice to see you again.
You too. Thank you for
Um,
inviting me in.
yes, of course. My pleasure. My pleasure. So, for everybody tuning in, welcome back to our HR Hot Seat series. And in this new mini series, we are breaking down the recruitment funnel. And today, this first session is going to be all about brand awareness. And we are doing that with Jasmina. Jasmina, maybe you can quickly introduce yourself and then we chat.
Absolutely. So, my name is Jasmina. I've been running a small agency focusing on employer branding. I've been in SeekNSpeak for the last 7 years, and I've really seen a huge change in the employer branding and recruitment market. And it's been very, very cool to see all the new stuff that are coming out, but also to see how much companies are actually focusing on employer branding specifically, but also a lot in recruitment marketing, and really getting to feel how much it can impact the company and the business as well.
Yeah, and that is actually what we're going to talk about as well today, Yasmina. There was one thing that I had to think about because so some people may know this, but Yasmina and we did a podcast episode together for HR Debatable together with Tom Jonkers, and it was all about employer branding. There were some really interesting debates, and one thing that you said during that episode really stuck with me, Yasmina, and you said something along the lines of whether you like it or not, you always have an employer brand. I thought it
Absolutely.
would be a nice thing to start with this conversation. Perhaps you can elaborate a little bit on what you mean by that.
Sure. And I'm so glad you picked up on that. That's a good one to remember. What I mean about it is that it's actually such an important part to recognize that employer branding is such a crucial part of actually having a great business. And especially also recognizing how much importance and effect it can have on the business, having the right employees, having satisfied employees. So I think for a long time, employer branding has been put aside. It's kind of been like something we do with the left hand when we have the time for it. We haven't really put so many resources in. There are no really budgets for it. And there's always something that's more important and a fire that needs to be put up somewhere else. But I think with the years and with the market as it is, it's come much more into play. And I think that finally companies are recognizing that we need to be able to control our employer brand even more, and really be very clear on what kind of employer brand we are and what kind of employer we are. But it's also very important to emphasize that no matter how much you try to control it, you actually can only control it so much, because in the end, it's in the hands of the one who's going to be seeing it and feeling it and experiencing it. So I think that kind of sums it up.
Yeah, I really like that thing that you said, because it made me think, and as we were chatting just before we went live, I have been talking about this on a couple of events in September as well, and it's very interesting because it is true. Even if you don't do anything at all as an organization, when I ask you, okay, Yasmina, what do you think it would be like to work for that company or for this company? You will probably, well, as long as it's a very well-known company, but even probably smaller ones that you see in the high street, for instance, you will probably have some kind of feeling or opinion about what it would be like to work for that company, right? And so as such, that employer brand already lives in people's minds. At least that's how I see it.
That is so true. That's a very good depiction of it, because we all know from our network and everybody who's around us, we talk so much about our jobs and the companies we work for. So it's just inevitable not to have an opinion of companies that you are not even close to, because you already hear so much. And this is also one of the points that I will be emphasizing about employee advocacy, and how it's super important that we actually listen to the employees that we have, because that will affect the employer brand and also the perception of our employer brand and the experience. So no matter how many great values and visions we throw out and we put on the webpage, in the end, it's always going to be the perception that's the most important. And that's what I mean about whether you like it or not, you have an employer brand. So no matter how much you try to control the perception, it's not up to you.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think that's very true. By the way, I haven't mentioned this yet, but of course, if you have any questions or comments or thoughts that you want to share, please do that with us in the comments, and then we can make this as much an interactive session as possible here on LinkedIn. So don't hesitate. Anything you want to share, that's also super nice. Perhaps about the way you are doing things regarding employer branding in your company. So yeah, please feel free to do so in the comments. And Jasmina, you briefly touched on it here, and I think it's an important element that we can actually also talk about, and that is indeed involving the people who work in the company in your employer branding activities. What is important to keep in mind when it comes to that?
From my perspective and from my experience, I would definitely say that the most important part is actually involving the employees throughout the whole process and developing the employer value proposition. Because I think that a lot of times when an employer brand doesn't resonate with the audience, it's probably because it's not relevant, it's not authentic, it hasn't really taken a deep dive into what the employees actually feel and experience. So I think involving the employees and actually listening to what their feedback is and how they experience it, how they exemplify the core values or whatever it is inside the company. I think that's one of the most important parts to emphasize. And when doing a strong employer brand and really defining a core EVP, I think it's super important that you actually also highlight it both internally but also externally. And I think the internal part is something that a lot of companies can struggle with, especially if it's a multi-brand organization, because we're so focused on actually just telling the world so much about what we've discovered and what we've defined. But the thing is that everybody that's inside the company also needs to actually get on board on whatever the feedback has been and whatever we defined from the feedback. So I think it's a very important thing not to miss, that we actually have to have everybody on board and everybody supporting and being advocates for what has actually been defined.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think this makes a lot of sense. I mean, you have of course a lot of experience with this, but would you say that this is something that you've come across as well when you were working with companies, that the internal part kind of was forgotten?
Yes, and I think the main reason for it being forgotten is because we have defined something in marketing, communication, and HR combined, but nobody really went out and asked the employees what they actually felt. So it's a natural thing to forget if you don't really feel the waters and the temperature. I think that no matter what you do, it has to reflect what the employees are searching for. What are their triggers? What are they looking for when they look for a job? And that should definitely reflect in your employer brand and in your EVP. And today that would be things such as diversity, sustainability, also personal growth opportunities. It's not only about the pay. It's also about what's in it for me. So I think that's one of the things that is very important to get. And when you have defined it, it's also very important to let the primary employees know, and those are actually the ones who are already in the company. Because I've also met companies where I've had interviews with employees, and I mentioned about, let's say, internal growth opportunities, and they look like a big question mark. They're like, oh, I didn't know that, or I didn't know we had this and this and this. And that is such an easy thing to fix, because if we don't let our current employees know what opportunities they have, then it's a really a shame.
Yeah, 100%. I actually see that we have a first comment as well. Thank you so much, Farai. I hope that I pronounced your name right. Great insight, Jasmina. Understanding your audience and what they want is critical in developing a compelling message to them. Yes, I think that is exactly right. Thank you so much for sharing. Now, Jasmina, one thing that I wanted to ask you, and I understand that this may be difficult to capture in a short answer, but could you perhaps give an example of how you can actually involve current employees in this process? Perhaps there's also multiple ways to go about this. I don't know. I'm asking you, what could be a good way to involve them? in that process from the start?
Very, very good, relevant question. I think first of all, of course, it depends on the size of the company and whether or not we already have a foundation to build on. If we have a foundation to build on, let's just say that. I think one of the things you could do is actually do surveys just to figure out like what's the temperature of the employees we have right now. What are the parts that we're lacking on? What are the parts that we're missing? And also, what are we doing really good? And have them exemplify it, qualify it, and actually say, what is it that we like about going to work in this specific company right now? What does it mean for me? And what am I really proud of? And have that actually highlighted on every platform that we have is super important. I think if you don't have a foundation, or if you have a foundation that's not really good and is not really giving you the strong employer brand you maybe have a bad reputation, I would definitely look critically into that and see, okay, what is it that we're missing? Why is there a mismatch in whatever we want to say and whatever is perceived from the audience? And then really figure out, so which buttons do we have to turn here? Is it something about the culture, or is it something about the environment, or is it something about like specific job tasks? And really look into how can we optimize this. So employer branding is not just doing like a marketing stunt and really doing some great campaigns and highlighting whatever we feel is super good from the company. It's also managing the parts that we're not super strong at and making them better.
Yeah, I think that's very well said. And I think it needs to be an actual reflection of what it is to be like in the organization. And I think here again, Varai, there's a comment. It is also important for organizations to practice what they promise in their actual organization. And that's exactly that. An employer brand generates psychological expectations by employees. And if those expectations are not met, then it can lead to employee disengagement and discontent. And I think this is, again, very well put, right?
Yes. Thank you for a great comment, Farai. I think that's such a good way to put it. And this is also one of the things you can work with in employer branding. It's level the expectations you are putting out for your company and for the future employees, but also for the existing employees. So I think this is also one of the good things you can look at. Are we promising something, and are we keeping the promise? So let's just touch base on, let's say, the growth opportunities. If we're promising internal employees growth opportunities, are we really following up on that? Are we succeeding on meeting their expectations, doing the training or whatever is necessary? Are we providing them with the right resources to actually make them grow? Because that will, in the end, keep them in the company, keep them happy, keep them growing, keep them evolving together with the company. And if we're not doing that, if we're just postponing or putting our focus somewhere else, then I think we all know the result of how that's going to roll out.
Yeah, yes, I think we do indeed. Jasmina, there was something else I wanted to ask you before we move on to the actual, let's say, how-tos. Yes, and it's about the challenges. I think we just touched on one challenge, right? Making sure that what you're communicating as your employer, being your employer brand, that's actually a reflection of the situation internally. So that is definitely, I think, one challenge. But what would you say are some other common challenges that you've seen when companies really start working with their employer brand?
I think one of the most common ones, if it isn't having a strong employer brand, I think that would be maintaining consistency throughout the employer brand and throughout maybe if you're a multi-brand organization, also keeping consistency in all the brands and actually also both making them individually strong, but also having them work as a unity. And what I mean about that is that it can be very difficult to maintain each brand individually because they have to stand out from all of the others in the company, but they also have to stand out from all the competition on the market. And how do we do that? It's a very hard discipline. And it always takes me back to that. I think the main thing is to be authentic and be relevant, as in any other marketing discipline, basically. So if you're not relevant with your audience, if you are not consistent, if you're not authentic, if you're not really showing how things are, people will definitely figure it out really, really soon. So, and it's maybe back to the comment we had from Farai earlier, maintaining the expectations and actually following up on the promise that we have. And that also means regularly aligning, okay, are we still on track with what we're promising our employer brand is? Do we still deliver on all these topics or values or whatever it can be?
Yeah, I have one question, and then I would like to go to I see that Farai asked a question, and that also there's some more comments, so I do want to get to those. But one thing from my end before that, Jasmina, because this is something we hear a lot, right? When we talk about employer branding, at least I seem to hear it a lot, is the word authentic, and almost to the extent that authentic doesn't seem to have that much meaning anymore. At least sometimes that's the idea that I get. But maybe could you briefly touch on what you mean exactly when you say that? Because the relevancy I get, you need to make sure that you're relevant to your audience. But what is what that authenticity? What are we talking about?
Such a good question, actually. That's a good perspective. And that's how it is with all topics you have and terms you have. They quickly get deflated because you use them too much and you don't really know what the description is or what the definition is. I think for me, when I say that something is authentic, it's also something that we can back up with data. So whatever we mention, whatever we say that we are or do, we should always be ready to back it up with examples, data, anything that's quantifiable that we can actually say, we are taking this seriously. We're looking into this. We have a strategy. We're also following the effect on this. And if we're not meeting the targets that we want to, I think we are looking into how can we then meet the targets. So let's say a topic like diversity, for example, I can see that a lot of companies are really going into this topic because it's hot, and we are looking at it from the job seeker sides, and they really want diversity or they want flexibility. But what does it actually mean? How do we work with diversity or flexibility? So what I'm looking at from a job seeker's point of view is something that I can definitely trust. And that could be something where it's really shown to me or it's specified to me how a company works with diversity. So put some numbers on. Let's say we have a goal where we want to be X and X percent in this topic, or when we say flexibility, it means this and this and this and this, and we know that our employees value this because. So exemplify it, show it to me, draw a picture, get some data on, and really be trustworthy when it comes to having statements.
I like that a lot. I like that a lot that you take it from the angle of the data, because I was thinking about asking you, like, could authenticity also mean that, you're being honest about the situation and you being honest about the fact that, for instance, in terms of diversity, you still got a bit of way to go as an organization. And actually it turns out that it is, only you're even backing it up with data, which makes total sense. So thank you for that. Also, thank you, Farai and Sahan. Again, I hope that I'm pronouncing your names correctly. So there's first a question from Farai. What role does technology play in employer brand management?
Another good question. I think it's a good thing to have. It's a tool in the toolbox for employer branding. And I would definitely use technology most to, back to the data, actually measure and see the performance and actually see, are we meeting the targets? Are we on track with how everything is going? And this means also using the technology internally. So figuring out whether or not the pulse evaluation is really good or bad, and where we need to put our focus. But also externally, are we actually reaching the audiences that we are supposed to reach? So it can be both, but I would definitely use technology mostly as a data tracker or a performance tracker. some way.
It makes a lot of sense. And then I guess it also really depends on your the available budget, right, for the technology and etc. And probably also on how elaborate your employer branding strategy is. Probably also if it's like a multi-brand organization, it's, I guess, anyhow. So I guess there's all these other factors. But yeah, so Farai, let us know if that answers your question.
If I can just elaborate a bit on that, because I'm pretty sure that most organizations and companies today have super solid technology, and they probably have a lot of features in their technologies and softwares and platforms that they're not using. So I think, first of all, figure out what is it that you want to use the technology for? What is it that we need answers to? And then go back and figure out, okay, so do we have it in the platform we're using right now? And set that up. If not, then find something that can support that. Because I'm pretty sure that most of us just use our technology for like the basic common things we use on a day-to-day basis. And we're not really aware of the whole landscape where we actually have a lot of opportunities. But it could also blind you a bit, because when you have so many functions, not everything is relevant. So just figure out first where you want to use the technology for, and then implement it in the right context.
Yeah, that is a very valuable addition. Thank you so much. All right, we're going to look at the comment from Sahan. Great insights. From my experience, this is very much critical when we have to overlook a group of companies while having multiple sub-brands under a large umbrella brand, because sometimes we miss out the small ones while focusing more on the large brands. So we have to ensure that we give the experience across the companies and all the brands equally. And then the second part of the comment, again, it's not easy as not all the companies are in the same industry, which leads to different expectations of the employees. And then Raviane is saying, very interesting topic. Just wondering what are the best ways to manage negative feedback or reviews on platforms like Glassdoor while maintaining a positive employer brand?
Yeah, well, the best way to manage it is actually beating it to it. So if you are on top of your employer brand, if you're on top of your feedback, doing exit interviews, having a really close relation to the employees and listening to their feedback, you have a very good way of actually preventing that it will happen. But if you are on platforms like Glassdoor or LinkedIn, I think that's also a very good source for the job seekers as well. I think really read what it says and take it back to the drawing board. Figure out, is this something that we actually that we have more employees experiencing? Is it like, how big is the problem, or is it like a unique case that has been negative? So I think, of course, do what you would normally do in the communication part about managing the feedback. But I would definitely go back and see how can we work with this. And at the same time, also maybe being proactive and responding to the comments and the reviews and saying, thank you so much for your constructive feedback. This is something that we will get going on. We will have a look at it. And it's actually a part of our goals where we want to do this and this amount better, or we have a strategy for this because we want to do better. So maybe also go into dialogue with the critics, because I think those are super valuable for optimizing the parts that are lacking.
Yeah, 100%. And I was also going to say, and you actually did that as well a little bit, Jasmina, is basically just also admit the fact that, I mean, definitely no organization is perfect, right? So yeah. I do think that there's something to be said for, first, let's go back and see if this is an issue, structural issue that we are aware of, and what are we actually going to do about it if that is the case. But at the same time, yeah, I mean, like a lot of things, it's a work in progress. So if there are issues in every single company, and I think that we can just admit that, because there's no such thing as a perfect organization. At least I don't think so. But you can of course disagree with me in the comments. Raviana, I hope that answers the question. And then Tom, hi Tom, so nice that you are here. So Tom is asking, can you link employer branding and pre-boarding/onboarding? Thanks, Tom.
Absolutely. I think it's a really good part of employer branding. And employer branding is just such a big umbrella that covers a lot of different topics and themes and activities. So I think pre-boarding and onboarding is a part of how we roll out and how we actually meet the expectations that we promised in the pre-phase of everything. So attracting the talents, attracting the employees, and actually getting them on board is one thing. And now we have come to terms for both parties that we are a match and we want to do this. So I think really be super clear on expectations for the employee, but also be super clear on what it is you will be providing. So I think this could be a really good time to actually introduce the employee to the company and to the way you work and to the culture and the opportunities as well. Because this is like when you have them and they're most motivated. So be sure to actually fill up their toolbox with the necessary tools they need to actually succeed.
Yeah, and Tom, by the way, I think that you probably have some ideas about this yourself. So I think it could be really valuable for everybody in the session that if you could share some of your view, maybe if you want to, of course. But something that I was going to add is I think that the pre-boarding phase, really, Jasmina, and then of course after that the onboarding, that is the first stage, really. That somebody who decided to join the company is already going to see whether or not that employer branding image that he or she has is a reflection of reality. So in that sense, I imagine it's quite a crucial stage.
Oh, absolutely. They will feel it the moment they step in the door, and they can definitely feel if that job description, all the interviews and all the things we were promised in the interviewing phase is actually something we can feel in the room when we are there. And it's also a very good way to figure out how the structure is, how the company works, what the processes are and everything. And it's super important for the employee to actually feel welcome and that the company is ready for them to get on board. So I think this is also one of the factors where if you have a really bad onboarding, you can be sure that your employee is not going to be there 1 year. We can definitely see the churn is super high. So I think this is also a low-hanging fruit to look at if you have a bad onboarding. Maybe also discuss with the employees you have, like, how was their onboarding? Was there something missing? Is there any feedback that we can implement and work with it?
Yeah, thank you. I think maybe one last thing, Jasmina, because this is something I wanted to ask you about, and I think it ties in a little bit also with Sahan's comment. That is, if we go back to these multi-brand organizations, there was mentioned that maybe the smaller ones can be easily overlooked. But in general, I can imagine, and you touched on it a little bit as well, that it's like a balancing act between, okay, we have this overarching brand, but then we have that several sub brands, I'm going to call them like that, that have their own identity. Is there something that you could say about how to ensure that you don't lose sight of that fact of these smaller ones having their own identity? Maybe something that you have come across?
Yeah, I would definitely say have a clear strategy overall, and then have a clear strategy for the sub brands, as you call it. I think also, again, back to involving the employees, I'm always going to say that, but I think using employee stories, testimonials, and having them exemplify how it is to work in that specific company, but maybe also linking it to how do I feel that we're part of something bigger? So I know I work in this small sub-brand, but how do I really feel being a part of a big conglomerate of brands? So I think really emphasize that. And maybe also if you have any stories where you have employees that have started in one brand and then internally mobilized to another brand inside the company, that's a great success story. I think this leaves a really good highlight too, that you have some internal mobility opportunities. We are really keen on keeping you here, and we want to do everything we can to actually provide you with the right growth opportunities. And we have so many brands inside the company, so why not just stay here instead of switching to something else? That's also a low-hanging fruit for the multi-brand organizations. It's super important to keep them close.
Wow, I really love that. I think it makes you started talking and I was like, oh wow, this makes actually so much sense. Yes, go back to the primary source, and that's the people working actually, of course, these other brands of the organization, because they probably know best. And I also love what you say about, and if then somebody has moved from one brand to another or to the main, but yeah, fantastic. I hope that is very useful. All right, we are going to slowly wrap up. Tom has shared something. My thoughts are similar. If employer branding is the Tinder phase and the job is the first phase, the Tinder phase. I like the analogy here. Keyboarding is like the morning after, so maybe the most crucial event in the whole process, with a smile.
Yes, that is true. I like the analogy too. But when you think of it, I think the whole employer-employee phase and terminology resembles a lot to dating. So I think take the parts out of it. And of course, if the boyfriend or girlfriend or whatever doesn't meet the expectations, you would be a bit like, I'm not really sure we're a match. So it makes perfect sense.
It does. And I think this is also a really beautiful way to end this session. Thank you so much, everybody, for all your valuable comments and your questions. Really, really, really nice. Jasmina, of course, also, thank you so much. I really enjoyed it. Any last words, perhaps?
I think if I could just say two things that are super important, and thank you all for the good questions and comments. The time flew by so quickly. I think one of the things is stay consistent and stay agile, which is, it's maybe kind of a paradox, but I think it's super important to actually quickly adapt to whatever feedback you're getting and manage expectations that way. But also remember that employer branding is more about authenticity than it is about perfection. So don't be afraid and don't be super focused on developing something that's perfect, because by the time you get there, it's going to be outdated. So just be more authentic, be real, be honest, and back it up with some trustworthy data.
Wow, Jasmina, thank you. That's another sentence I'm going to keep in mind and probably recycle. The ones about employer brand is more about
please
than it is about being perfect. I like that very much. Thank you so much. Thanks everybody for tuning in, and hope to see you for a new episode of this series very soon. And everybody enjoy your day. Bye.
Bye.